GT5 podcast going to another episode. This chick talking about submission to marriage. We're gonna let her talk, and then I'm gonna go ahead and come back with it. Um, One thing I want you guys to listen to, and you hear from the men's side too, um, but listen to the rationalization of why this person thinks the way they do, and then think about it like this. So think about it from another angle. Think about it as um, if the level is in the eye of the beholder, right? If they hold it to a level and they say, this is what you got to do, who's really in charge, right? Who's really running that show? So think about it like that. I'm going to let her talk real.
Of submission. Just
We're going to go back. We're going to go back a little bit.
make sure that you got your Bible glasses on.
All right. So we're going to talk about what she said. So, and this is an issue on both sides of the aisle. This is the issue on both sides of the aisle. Here's the problem. Number one, she's correct. The whole submission, all that crap. It's in the Bible. Yes, and it's not crap. It's in the Bible. It states that. But the problem is the premise is the I'm holier than thou mindset, right? So she goes into it instead of saying I need to be the type of woman that a man that follows God will want. She said you need to be a righteous man. For me to do this, you need to do this. If you start out by saying for me to do this, you need to do this, that's the problem. It should, and even for men be like, well, I want my wife to do this or that or the other. For me to do this as a man, my wife needs to do this. Or you get from wives, well, I'll do this if you do this. You don't do that based on what the person is doing. It is not a you like if you are loyal to the Lord, you put God first in everything. You're gonna follow Him because you doing that in His obedience is in obedience to Him. So like a husband taking care of his wife, loving his wife, he's not doing that because of his wife. Now his wife gets the pleasure and gets the benefit of that, but a Christian man, is doing that because that's what God has called him to do. And so it doesn't matter what his wife does, right? It doesn't matter what your wife does. It doesn't matter what your husband does. Like if you're in the playbook, if you're running the offense that Jesus is called, if He called a run play, and you think that you need to be the one that's in charge and you're going to change it to a pass play, this is not. You're not the Peyton Manning of the game, obviously. You're not Tom Brady. You're not those level of dudes. And so for you to come in and say you need to be something worth, well, what is your value? Like ask yourself, have some self reflection. That's one of the things that the Bible is huge on. It has a lot of there's a lot of self reflection. Even with Paul, with Jesus himself, he self reflects on himself. And so if he can self reflect, I feel like we should be able to self reflect as well. But that's the problem is nobody wants to self reflect. Everybody wants to say, if you do this, I'll do this. They want you to do it first, essentially. And so it becomes a battle. It becomes a waiting game. And this is crazy because that's what is being taught out here too. It becomes a waiting game of, well, who's gonna budge first? And so you're just like both on this path, both on your paths not together because you're not really together, apart path. But you can tell when a couple has come to the revelation. It's been revealed that it's not about who does it first. It's about why you do it. And so if you understand why you do it, then all the other stuff doesn't matter. So if you understand why you do it, then going first doesn't matter to you. You're not like, well, I'm gonna. Well, if he doesn't do it first, or if she doesn't do it first, then that doesn't matter. That ceases to matter. If you understand why you do it, then it doesn't matter what they're doing, right? If you are a virtuous woman all day, every day, 100% of the time, consistently, right? You're going to get, God is going to give you that type of husband, right? Because you're desiring something, but you're also making sure that you are being the type of person that deserves what you desire. You can't desire something and you don't deserve it. Like if you're not going to do nothing, you can't expect something to be done. Um, and that's the crazy thing that goes into the mindsets of new age people when you get the younger generations, people in their 20s, 30s, 40s. Whereas you get the older couples that have been doing this thing for a long time, 35, 40 years, they understand that. And even the worst part is that you'll get some of the better couples that I've ever dealt with are not Christian people. They don't go to church every Sunday. Christian people be having some of the worst relationships ever. And part of the problem is there's a doctrinal problem inside Christianity right now that is doing three things that it shouldn't be doing. Number one, it's creating a false pretense of I deserve something. That is not correct. In the Bible, it does nowhere in the Bible does it ever say you deserve something. It never says that. Like the Bible is all about giving. It's all about generosity. It's all about loving. It's all about caring. It's all about nurturing. Those are the things that you don't you don't have that mindset. Like if you have that type of mindset, you can't be a generous person and think like this lady thinks. You can't be a loving, caring person and think like this lady thinks. If it's I'll do this if you do this, how are you going to be generous? If it's I'll do this if you do this, how are you going to be loving and caring, right? If it's I'll do this after you do this, then how are you going to be nurturing? How do you do those things? And so I think that that's part of the problem with this generation is that we have the mindset of we think we deserve something, or no, we want something, we desire something that's more than what we deserve. You gonna get what you deserve. At the end of the day, wherever your relationship is, wherever your friendship is, wherever your work is, whatever, you're getting what you deserve in that moment, right? Because that's what you earned. You earn that. How you act, how you live, what you do with your life, you earn the things that you got. So if you think that you deserve more, you probably should be doing more. Don't get in the mindset of I deserve to have everything under the sun, but you're not doing anything to be able to deserve everything under the sun. And so I agree with her first part. Her premise was good, but then she went into that mindset of, well, you got to be like this. And the problem is, number two thing the church is doing, um, let thy who is without sin cast the first stone. And everybody out here casting stones while sinning at the same damn time. And so that's the problem. Everybody's worried about casting stones and want to point everybody else's problems out, but they don't want to point their own problems out. Like I said, the Bible is self-reflective. Paul self-reflected a lot. Jesus himself self-reflected. So if you desire to be like Jesus, you probably won't have to self-reflect. But you have to actually self-reflect, not just tell people that you are down on yourself or that you feel bad about this or you feel bad about that, but like actually self-reflect to the point where you want to change something, where you want to make some change. Because what happens is people will self-reflect for pity or to if you get an argument, they'll self-reflect in the moment to try to win the argument or try to change the trajectory of the argument. But it's like self-reflection, you'll know if somebody's actually self-reflecting because they will change. Like they will actually make the changes that they're talking about changing. They won't just self-reflect all the time because people who self-reflect like that, they never change. It's the same self-reflection every single time. So 2, 3, 4, 5 years down the road, you're getting the same self-reflection. So and people and the third thing church is doing, which ties into the self-reflection, is the abundance of grace that they'll give to themselves, they won't give to other people. Right. So if you're gonna give yourself an abundance of grace, you better have the same grace for other people. Like if you're gonna be graceful toward your actions, you gotta be graceful toward other people's actions. You can't just be graceful towards yourself. That's selfish. And Jesus did not call for us to be selfish people. And so even he was even graceful to the people that wronged him. Like that's the level of grace that we're supposed to have. But the problem is we want to be graceful to ourselves because we're like we see we're flawed, but we don't allow other people to be flawed too. You have to allow other people to be flawed as well. Because if you're flawed, you can't sit here and tell somebody else about their flaw, right? Because you flawed up too. So self reflection is an issue. And that's an issue in relationships. That's an issue in friendships. It's an issue everywhere around the globe. You can see that. And so I think that self reflection is missing from her and her point of view and her perspective. Because that's one of those perspectives that you'll see a lot. You'll hear people say that type of stuff a lot. Uh, she'll be like, well, you have to be this type of person for me, the type of person that will make me want to. But I'm like, if God is first in your relationship, then it doesn't matter what you want to do. Like you do what God told you to do, right? Because if He is first and you're being obedient to Him, then what your partner doing it has nothing to do with anything. It's what you're supposed to. You're in obedience to God, and I think people take God out of the relationship and make themselves God. So now they're idolizing themselves. So they'll take God out of the relationship, make themselves God. But like, well, if you are like this, then I'll be like this. And that's why I tell you, you can't forget the reason why you're doing the things that you're doing. And that's part of the problem is they forget that the reason why I'm in this relationship or I'm in this marriage or I got these friends or I got this job promotion, I'm doing this at work, is because God put you there. So if you put God first, then you're going to do what God asks you to do regardless. Like that's the ultimate level of obedience. Is being able to do what God asks you to do, even when the person that you're with or the person that you're accountable for isn't doing what God asked them to do, right? And then you don't focus on what God asked them to do because you need to be focused on what God asked you to do. And you do that and focus on yourself. And then good things happen when you start to focus on yourself. Self reflection, though, I think that that's huge here. I got kind of long winded on this one because that's something that is rampant in churches. That's something that's rampant in just regular, just I mean, outside of church, just regular civilization. They deal with that. I mean, it's an issue. Divorce rate is super high because the mindset, right? You can't have all these expectations of your spouse or your significant other, but have no expectation for your damn self. Like you gotta have expectation for yourself first, and then we can talk about expectation for your spouse. But if you can't even hold yourself to your own expectations, you can't expect your spouse to hold themselves. You can't hold them accountable to nothing because you ain't held yourself accountable first. So accountability starts with the individual through self reflection, and then accountability moves on to the next person. That's how accountability is supposed to go. That's how it was meant to be, but that's not how it is now. We want to hold each other accountable instead of holding ourselves accountable. That's where growth comes in. And so, like I said, her premise started. She started out good, but I knew where she was going. I could just tell where she was going to go with it, and she went there. And so she went there, so I had to go there with her. And I mean, like I said, you guys can disagree all you want to, but I think that at the end of the day, if God is the center of your relationship, you do it because that's what God instructed you to do. You don't do it because of something else or somebody else. Because if you do it because of something else or somebody else, then you've taken God out of the center, and you put yourself in there. Because now it becomes about what you want and not about what God wants. If you keep it about what God wants, then you ain't gonna have no problems. You won't have problems, but um, your problems will be easier to overcome because now God is in the relationship. But if you put yourself in the middle and say, this is what I want, or this is how I feel, or it's me, 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 me all the time, then you have idolized yourself. So now you're the God of the relationship, and everything goes through you. And so that's essentially what she said. I am the God of the relationship. So in order for me to do what God instructed me to do, I need my husband to do this, right? And notice what she said though. Like he has to be a righteous man, according to who is the question. And if you ask her that question, she probably gonna say some rebuttal dumb stuff, but you can tell by her demeanor it's according to her. So she's setting the boundaries for her husband's righteousness into the effect on if she's going to follow her husband, right? So she may need to examine herself instead of examining her husband, right? Examine yourself. Ask yourself, why are you doing what you're doing? And then why is God not being put first in your mind? Because in your mind, you may think you're putting God first, but you're putting yourself first. You are the God of your relationship. And that's biblical. That's biblical. I can go on all that. That's biblical. That goes back to Adam and Eve when Eve ate that apple. Eve ate that apple because the knowledge that God had is what she wanted. So she effectively made herself the God of the relationship. That's in a woman's nature now. And so that's the reason why women are so demanding and have all these statistics and this checklist. You got to do this. For me to do this, you got to do this, and this, because they think that they are the God of the relationship. And society's also told them that as well. Happy spouse, happy wife, happy life. You got to keep the cook happy, old school stuff, right? So that's been brought up through generations. And so if that becomes an issue, and then that's when you get this. That's when you get this type of stuff where if if he's like this, and so essentially it puts him or the spouse or significant other, and men do this stuff too. You put your significant other in a, you put them in a between a rock and a hard place where they can't do anything because it's all up to you on if it's good enough. So if it's up to you on if it's good enough, where's God at in that, right? Because God didn't tell you that you were the top of the world, so why do you act like you're the top of the world? And so that's when people put themselves into God's place in a relationship, and they believe that it has to be based on them and it should be based on God. And God is pretty specific in the Bible what He expects. And so if He expects certain things, then it should be easier to understand and to know. Like expectations should be easier to be met because it's right there in front of you. But that's the problem is that a lot of people don't really read the word or they don't apply the word to life, to living. They might go to church on Sundays, Mondays, Tuesdays, Wednesdays, whenever you go to church, and they'll listen. But if you listen to the word, but you can't speak it to somebody else, then I don't like. For me, I gotta speak it to. Like I can't just listen. Like if I just go in there and listen, I you tune out a lot. I mean, it's like school. You tune out a lot. But now when you get to actually go in, listen, and then take it, and then you explain it to somebody else or break it down to somebody else, then it sticks. It makes it helps it stick. Which you should be able to. You should be able to take a sermon that you get on Sunday and Monday or Tuesday or Wednesday when you're speaking to somebody about church, you should be able to tell them what you learned in the sermon. But most people can't even do that because it's about emotions and feeling when they go to church. So as opposed to learning how you're supposed to conduct yourself, it's more like I feel good here, and so I like coming here because I feel good here, as opposed to I'm coming here to learn how to conduct myself out in the real world. And so that's when you start to have problems. And if a person says that they're conducting themselves to the absolute most, they have idolized themselves and made themselves God, essentially. So, but it's GT5 podcast. I appreciate you guys. Please make sure that you like, subscribe to the channel, share,